And this week we will talk about stealth destroyers under Project 15B. Now, 4 guided missile destroyers are being constructed as Majgaon Dock under Project 15B for Indian Navy. Indigenously designed and constructed, these warships have improved survivability, seakeeping stealth and maneuverability. Propelled by 4 gas turbines, these 4 stealth destroyers will be able to achieve speeds of over 30 knots. The weapon systems and sensors on board these ships will allow them to engage shore-based, sea-based and air targets at long distances. According to reports, all of them will be armed with precision strike BrahMos supersonic cruise missiles, next generation Barak surface-to-air missile systems, 127mm guns and rocket launchers as well. First of these destroyers, INS Vishakhapatnam, is likely to be commissioned to Indian Navy in 2021-22, followed by INS Marmugao, INS Imphal, and the 4th one, which is yet to be named. So for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests in the studio today. Let me first introduce the guest to you, beginning with retired Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha. We also have with us Commander Abhijit Singh, Head of Maritime Policy Initiative from ORF, and Mayank Singh, Senior Journalist who keeps a tab on the defense aspects and the policy in the defense sector. Let me begin with you, Admiral Sinha, and let's try and understand both about Project 15B as well as the destroyers. What is their place as far as the Indian Navy scheme of things is concerned?
Destroyers are the most powerful surface ships, really, without an aviation element, except that they will have a Sea-King or the new helicopter, which is likely to come. The negotiations have already been done. So the sonar system is same, but destroyers can do very high speed, much faster than the frigates, and they have punch, solid punch. So much so that I would think that with an anti-submarine helicopter, it is really the most powerful platform that any navy can have. So that is about destroyer. As far as the 15 Bravo weapon system that you have just mentioned, right now the destroyers have got the 100mm gun, which helps the, which is used for the surface fighting. Very helpful when the amphibious troops are landing on the shore. But this one will have 127mm, which is under contract, is being built by the Bharat Heavy Engineering Limited, BHEL. They are already in service, but the fire rate is a little high, and the ranges are much better. It's a sturdy gun. So basically, it is by and large indigenous.
Okay.
You also mentioned about the long-range SAM. This has been inducted in the Kolkata class. It's the LR SAM of the Barak new generation. It's 70 kilometers plus type of ranges. So that is what gives it a reach beyond what the air defense of the present systems are. And the rocket launchers are the same. Sonar system is the same. The radars are going to be changed significantly.
Okay.
You may have a indigenous radar in place of the Garpoon, which is the so-called fire control system, and also the surveillance radar. It is quite possible, it's not confirmed as yet, that the old RAWL, RAWL, that may be replaced by a indigenous radar.
Okay.
So there is a fair amount of indigenous content, and the stealth features that you talked about is slightly higher than the 15 Alpha.
Okay, so stealth features higher and a bit more advanced as far as weapon systems and sensors are concerned. Let me bring Commander Abhijit here. Commander Abhijit, in terms of destroyers, as Admiral Sinha put, next only to the aircraft carriers, and their use both in terms of as a strategic weapon as well as also as a platform, which is very crucial to navies like the Indian Navy.
Absolutely. I just take off on that point of, you mentioned aircraft carriers. So what every navy basically tries to do is to build a balanced force. And in a balanced force, if you see the balanced force as constituting a spectrum, and submarines on one end of the spectrum and say aircraft carriers on another end, and aircraft carriers representing sheer physical presence, and submarines representing, say, stealth, standoff capability, maneuverability, etc. The stealth warship lies somewhere in the middle. A stealth warship has the presence of a carrier, not as much as the carrier, a little less in it, but it has a substantial sort of footprint. And it also has the maneuverability, the reach that you would want from the other end of the spectrum. So it's the perfect platform to have as far as the surface Navy is concerned. And so the destroyers usually are the workhorses of the Navy. Now, what's so special about the P-15 class, the P-15A and P-15Bs? So they have, from what my understanding is, this thing called advanced stealth. It's not just stealth, but advanced stealth, and they achieve this through a combination of angled decks as well as using material that makes the superstructure radar transparent. And they also have some kind of network centricity, a point that Admiral Sinha had mentioned, that puts them in another league. So they have power systems, data systems, combat management systems that are all integrated. And the understanding here is that if you have a really flexible platform, which is well networked in the maritime domain, you don't then need too many platforms of that size. So it's not as if you need 15 destroyers or 20 destroyers. If you just have 4 or 5 of these destroyers, they will be able to perform in the same way as you would have performed had you had lesser platforms in greater numbers. That's the logic of having these very superior, technologically advanced network platforms. So I think in that sense, I think the Navy has got the balance right. But it's just that I think that this is going to turn out in the end to be an extremely expensive proposition for us. But that we can discuss a little later.
Okay, definitely. We'll come to that part a bit later. But let me bring Mayank here. Mayank, let's go through the Project 15B once again. You know, starting from its inception as well as the 15A, which was talked about, and as Commander Abhijit put, both of them are crucial as far as Indian Navy is concerned.
See, Navy has been one of the force which has planned things for itself very well in terms of whatever budget it's given, then what kind of platforms it's going to acquire for itself or it's going to build for itself. I mean, we are talking about an completely indigenous ship in which, I mean, so seeing the Navy's, there's a long-term integrated perspective plan, there's a 5-year plan, and then whatever is required immediately.
Okay.
So Navy is the one force which has done very diligently its homework. And then whatever the threat perception around your nation is, whatever the maritime aspects of threat are there, it has weaved in things very well. Thus, it has brought in the concept of 15 Alpha, 15, which was Delhi, 15 Alpha, Kolkata class, and 15 Bravo now, Vishakhapatnam class. All 4 ships are going to be with you. They are such a potent weapon with them. I mean, with you, with the Indian Navy. Thus, whatever the plans are, whatever the things are, they are going very well, actually.
Okay. But if you look at the concept of having destroyers, and as both the gentlemen put it there, from the naval parlance, if you look at it, in terms of their strategic importance also, and as Commander Abhijit said, you know, they're just next to the aircraft carriers, and they are the actual war horse of the Navy.
See, when you move an aircraft carrier, it's a carrier battle group, actually. You are moving other number of ships which are along with the carrier battle group. Here is a war horse. I mean, the word war horse in itself is such a, in every work wherever you require, you have to project your image. Here is a destroyer, which has got everything. You said surface, it has got surface capability, it has air capability, which can manage all threats from all across the domains. So, I mean, with the helicopters, which we are going to acquire, I mean, whatever we have actually in terms of camo and all, if it has got, I mean, anti-submarine warfare things, missiles, such potent missiles you are talking. BrahMos is also indigenously developed missile actually. So if you see, I have to bring another point into it. If you see, normally the construction, the manufacturing is divided into 3 parts, which is move, float, and fight. If you see, in case of move, in case of float, we have reached to the power actually. We have reached to the level wherein we are bringing in everything.
Okay.
In terms of weaponry also, which is fight section, we are doing very well. BrahMos is a joint venture actually. In terms of gun production also, the other important part which we normally not see is metallurgy. Since last 10 years or so, it is Steel Authority of India, which has primarily started supplying the steel for you actually.
Okay.
Which was creating a huge expenditure, pressure on your exchequer.
Okay.
So now you produce that in your country only. The cost of it, it may be a little more than what you normally get, this kind of steel which you get outside.
Okay.
But it is almost half the cost of whatever you are importing from other countries. So now look at it. It's your design, Department of Naval Design of Navy. It is designing that. It is being manufactured in Majgaon Dockyard Limited. The material which is being used is from India. Look at it, the kind of progress we have.
Okay, so the indigenization aspect is quite important. I'd like to bring Admiral Sinha on this aspect only, both indigenization as well as the structured approach as far as Indian Navy is concerned, as Mayank was pointing out. And in our previous shows also, Commander Abhijit has also pointed out the same thing. If you look at all three forces, Indian Navy seems to have a lot more structured approach towards what it needs right now, what it needs in the long term, and then from the indigenization aspect, it is way ahead of the other two forces.
True, Vishal. What happened was that all I can say that our forefathers were very far thinking, and they planned the Navy very well. Once the Leander came to Indian Navy, they decided that they will make the Leander in India under license, and they bought the design from the British. And thereafter, most of the ships, they are a development on the Leander class, the design. And in that, the Naval Design Bureau has done a very fabulous job. So that is number one. The Navy took the indigenization route very seriously, mainly because they knew that the ships are very expensive. The exchequer will lose a lot of foreign exchange, and therefore it is time for us to start making our own. The important part is the designing. So once you design, then after that is a question of fabrication. So we started off with the design, and then we had the the shipyards, PSU shipyards. All said and done, they have done a very good job. Might be very time consuming for the first one, but the second, third, fourth ships have rolled out in time. So that is on that aspect, Navy has done quite well. The best part is the user interaction with the builder has been right from the design stage. We know exactly what we require.
So it's done from the end user's perspective.
Absolutely. The end user writes the QRs, and that goes to the the design bureau. Then they design the ship and they say, okay, fine, it's going to be 162 meters long, it's going to be 7,500 tons. What all are we going to put? After that, it is a question of development of the indigenous component, the content of it, and upgrade, keep doing the life upgrade. 15 Alpha, 15 Bravo, not very, very different. But you see the weapon systems, they'll be more Indian, they'll be longer range. The radars, the sensors are going to be completely Indian. It's developed in India. In fact, if I'm not wrong, the SSR is built by a private company. So, that's the achievement. Navy always has a warship overseeing team in every shipyard. And they are the ones who clear the ship for the next stage of build during the process of those 3-4 years.
Okay.
Each type of ship has got a warship overseeing team. And they are the ones who are responsible to the naval headquarters, to the controller of warship production and acquisition, and it is reviewed. So it's quite a systematic and
a close coordination.
Very close coordination. And therefore, we have progressed. Luckily, we have progressed more, and our indigenous content will be probably 85-90% now, including the weapon systems.
Okay. Abhijit, that's a steady progress, and we have had this discussion quite a number of times. The cost right now, which you're pointing out, might be a little more, but once we've acquired that self-sufficiency and indigenization to a particular level, then maybe if we increase the numbers, the cost factor might come down and might be then accounted for.
You make a point. I would prima facie agree with you that once you build up the numbers, then it would perhaps be easier for us to sustain those numbers at sea. But let me just say this to you, that in planning the 15 Alphas and Bravos, indigenization was of course a concern, in the sense, a concern meaning it was definitely one driver of what's happened over the past few years. And this is a real poster child for indigenization. I think we have much to feel proud of, seeing all of these ships being commissioned. But I actually want to bring in another aspect, that is that look at the approach that the other navies have followed. For instance, the Chinese Navy. The Chinese have these Type 52 deltas, Charlies and deltas, their destroyers that they send to the Indian Ocean often for the anti-piracy deployments. And in these anti-piracy missions, these platforms perform multiple tasks. Now, these are all expensive platforms, and the Chinese took sort of many years to develop these platforms. The main imperative, as far as we are concerned, was to somehow make sure that we can match the Chinese in terms of the forces that they are deploying in our waters. The Chinese are coming up with something called the Type 55, which is way, way more sophisticated than our alphas and bravos, than our 15A alphas and bravos. So on that point, coming back, and this gets back to the point that you were making, if we were simply going in for numbers that weren't very, platforms that weren't very sophisticated, well, then we would not have been able to keep, project power in the same way that we ideally desire.
Okay.
By having the alphas and bravos now, we built that base, that foundation, from which we can now hope to develop the capability that will in some ways be at par with our competitors and adversaries in the region. Even if you look at, so say, example, the Type 45s that the Royal Navy is developing, it's in a class of its own, closer to, say, the Chinese platforms, but definitely more advanced than the Indian platforms. So I think that it's a good idea for us to go in for expensive platforms, and I hope that in the future this will then become that sort of a sort of takeoff point for us to develop further more sophisticated platforms and then deploy them in the field.
Okay, you brought in a very interesting aspect, and that is, the comparative. And let me bring Mayank here. Mayank, when we talk about our platforms, weapon platforms, and specifically when we look at the Navy, then we also look at our neighborhood. And as Commander Abhijit is pointing out, we look at China, we look at what Pakistan has got. Of course, most of it comes from China only. But then the other navies also, which are there in the region, which try and project their power. So in those terms, how would Project 15B, that's P15B, would help Indian Navy to project itself?
The point here I would like to bring out is actually it's the extension of whatever was happening in the past. Improvement, it's a gradual improvement over whatever you have been doing. If India is turning indigenous, that is how your step-by-step improvement is towards it. And now we are talking, as Admiral Sinha said, that we are reaching to the point of 85%, wherein of 100% of the ship, 85% we have reached to the indigenous this thing.
Okay.
So coming to whatever we want, actually, as per our threat plans, as per our observations all around, as per our own, the kind of tasks and roles which we have got, we have been making a very steady progress, actually. And there's a very interesting, nugget, which was once a Chinese ship was trying to traverse into the Indian Ocean, and here was Indian Navy which said, welcome. It has sent a welcome note to the Chinese Navy. The observations, the kind of work in terms of interconnectivity, in terms of force multipliers, Indian Navy has planned itself, as I initiated my talk with, its capital budget so very well.
Okay.
It's so well, synergized, one, to force multiplied in terms of LRMR, long-range maritime reconnaissance aircrafts and all, synergized with the kind of radars, with the sensors and, weapons of, rest of the ships, surface ships. Then you have got your subsurface plan, submarines and all. It has been planned very well.
Okay.
So if Indian Ocean is your focus, you have that role. You are the primary, you have been given the task of handling the entire, in case of disaster management, reef, let's say, it's just for example, to make you understand the kind of role in which India has been playing in this region since almost tsunami when it started. It has come up so very well, actually.
Okay. Okay, so there are, quite a number of roles there as well. Abhijit, I know you would want to speak on that. I'll come to you as well. But Admiral Sinha, from this aspect of how projects like Project 15B would figure in, or rather would ensure that the maritime policy which our Navy is following or has to follow in the near future as well, that gets done?
As we mentioned that our forefathers were really very, far-sighted. And when the Project 15 came, the Delhi class, we had this international fleet review in Mumbai in the year 2001. and I got American destroyer in the vicinity who had also come to attend the IFR. So he said, "Can I see your ship?" And I brought him on board, and he said that in many ways it is ahead of the Spruance class destroyer. So I asked him, "How do you say this?" He said, "These are the features which you have little more." Coming back to the mention that you made about the indigenous content, the technology transfer costs a lot of money. It is not so much in building but if you want to take the technology fully, then you have to pay a lot of money.
And it's not that easy as well.
It's amortized over, this one full class of ship. Unfortunately for us, we don't make too many ships in one class. 15, Project 15 was just what, 3-4 ships. Similarly, 15 Alpha, 15 Bravo also 4 ships. If you make more of those in a same time frame, then what happens that your efficiency in shipbuilding becomes better.
Okay.
But now you got a lot of new things, but you're building only 4 ships. By the time these 4 ships get commissioned, you will find that technology would have changed. So Navy would like to have the change technology. So Navy is already, the moment you commission a ship, the midlife upgrade is already under planning. And by the time the ship finishes 4-5 years of life, the midlife upgrade program has been approved.
Okay.
So this is how far Navy
that's quite fast. If you look at how things move elsewhere.
Very fast. And it has been this has been a process of development, which both our distinguished speakers mentioned, and this has helped us quite a lot.
Okay.
You will not find in our Navy the weapon systems. Normally, what happens is 30% is new, 60% is legacy, and another 10% is old. We haven't got many old ships. In fact, more than 30% are the state-of-the-art ships. So we are that way quite. The second point is that we have kept a very lean Navy. The manpower-wise, it is the smallest, and depending upon the systems, weapon systems, that we ask for a manpower sanction. As a result, we have been able to spend 60% of our total budget into capital and 40% or maybe less. In fact, 1 year we spent only 38%. So rest of it goes for capital ships. So which is a very good ratio, which the Army has not been able to do, which the Air Force has not been able to do.
Something for which there have been reforms which have been brought about, and Chief of Defence Staff as well, obviously moving ahead with that. But concluding comments from you, Commander Abhijit, on the strategic aspect vis-a-vis the maritime policy.
So Admiral Shekhar Sinha makes some very interesting points, but just to add to what he said, navies are not just about technology. Technology is certainly important, and on technology, I'd like to say that we shouldn't overstate what we've achieved. I think on the fight side, as Mayank was mentioning, we made some progress, but we have miles to go. Yes. And in terms of sensor and weapon development, we are not nearly there where we should have been in so many years. So I don't want to overstate the technology side. I'm proud of what we've achieved, but we certainly have more distance to go. But what I want to say is that there is always a maritime philosophy that underlies your operations. Our maritime philosophy is fleet-centered. And fleet-centered meaning we give a lot of emphasis to the aircraft carrier, to the big platforms like destroyers and frigates. And the stealth frigate is one of those major platforms where our emphasis lies. My fear is that we've now entered an era in which budgets are always going to be a point of worry. And it is only yesterday at the Raisina dialogue that the different chiefs that were there in one of the panels were posed this question about budgets and what they were doing about it. And the question was actually meant for the UK Sea Lord, but it was indirectly meant for all the admirals on the stage to answer. And none of them had really a very satisfactory answer to give. Okay. In today morning's newspaper, there's a news item which states that the Navy is going to be cutting its force plans by almost 20 to 30%. And that's because we don't quite have the budgets that we require to build our forces. So the only worry is that whilst these big platforms are good to have, will we be able to get the bare minimum numbers to sustain our operations at sea? Okay. And that only time will tell.
Okay, definitely. That is something which the time will tell, and that is for our policymakers to go ahead and decide effectively as to how to utilize that money, something which has been done very efficiently.